Here we are together again, episode 6 of Coach to Influence, where we bring great coaches in to talk about what's working, what's not. Today, I am blessed to have Trevor Nicholson with Forrester joining us, and Trevor brings a great perspective. Trevor has led teams in the past, he has coached, but now finds himself as an individual contributor. And today, we're going to talk about some of the leadership skills and the skill sets that great coaches who find themselves back in the saddle as individual contributors can apply to bring not only value to what they're doing to everybody else on the team. So why don't you introduce yourself, Trevor? Tell us a little bit about yourself and let's get it on.
Thanks so much, Joe. Yeah, Trevor Nicholson, Senior Account Director over at Forrester. Worked in sales probably north of like 20 years now in various roles. A lot of startup activity as well. So I'm psyched to have this conversation.
Psyched to have you here. So, let's start at the beginning. How did you get into sales? How'd you find yourself as a sales leader and how'd you find yourself back to Forrester now?
Well, I started out in advertising for like a little bit over a year. And then, so I was on the account side. So you're kind of a liaison between the creative and the client. And this is like 2000 era. So there was a big .com boom and took a
Never heard
job.
of it.
Took another job to get out of advertising in the sales, not quite knowing what I was doing. And I really like the ability, I like the commission side of it. Like I think you're kind of your own boss in terms of the sky is the limit. So that was my introduction. And then one area, which was really interesting for me, was I was a financial recruiter. So I was sort of selling the job as well as selling the client to the company. And this was in investment banking pre-2008. And that was a really complicated sales process, which taught me a lot, which then led me to kind of this startup world, which I was in for 15 plus years before and I've been a Forrester now 2.5 years.
Oh, wow. So, as somebody that has led teams that now finds themselves as an individual contributor, what are some of the biggest takeaways from your previous experiences that you're bringing into your role?
Well, I was very eager to get out of management, managing people. My career took me to a place where I was working with this company for about 10 years. It got acquired, and then I started my own business, completely irrelevant to anything I've done before. It was a kids' meal home delivery service. So the impetus was just like, I have 2 daughters, and my wife and I just couldn't get lunches made. It was just this pain point, and I couldn't shake the idea for a long time. And I thought, well, how hard could this be? I'm kidding a little bit there. What I tried to do was just figure out every reason why I shouldn't do this, which I think is always a good idea when trying to start a business. And was in that role as a CEO for a couple of years, managing various different teams. And so when I was pursuing my next role, I just needed a breather. I needed a breather to kind of go back to like, ultimately what the advantage I get right now is I'm managing my own book of business. And contrary to like the startup world where I felt I had to have all the answers, I had a board, I had advisors I could go to, but there's a lot of responsibility when it's like, I have to figure everything out. Now it's amazing. I can ask my manager. I can ask his manager. There's a chain of and there's a wealth of resources at my fingertips as long as I'm willing to ask for help, it's a big sigh of relief because I'm a big advocate of like, I don't have all the answers. I might think like this looks pretty good, but even in that sense, it's like, let me send this out to my boss to be like, how do you think this proposal looks or this deck looks? I feel like having the ability to be, it's not reliant, but be like enthusiastic and confident that anyone around me can make whatever I'm doing better is a huge advantage that I'm loving in my current role.
Talk about that a little bit because a lot of sellers, when they live in their little silos, don't think about the impact they can have on the people around them. So I'd
Yeah.
love to get your thoughts on the impact you have on others around you when you're not leading by authority and you're just setting an example.
Yeah, I think I've had a couple managers in my career at Forrester, and the ecosystem is really built in a way that we are very much a team. Not even a team within our sales team, but a team across other sides of the organization. And so what I love, and I'm thinking about like team calls, we're talking about successes. We're talking a lot about like what didn't work. So it gives people kind of an opening to talk about, a bad discovery call or something like that, where it's like you prepped and you left it going, man, I fell flat on my face. What could I do differently there? And so I think for my role, I've had this is use, my past experience to perhaps help someone on the team around something that maybe I've seen that they haven't, seen. So, when I think about like taking away my not taking away, but going from managing teams to being a individual contributor, I still feel very much that like have a team. I don't think I have to let's say lead the team, but the support that I can bring is very much encouraged. And what I love too is that the leadership isn't sitting there going, "We have it all figured out" either. So the encouragement's coming from them to be like, what do you all think?" Which is a great place to sit within an organization, in my opinion.
No, it's a valid point that you make. I'm curious, what are some of the gems that you might be passing down to individual contributors that you've learned the hard way, both being in the trenches at startups and managing teams yourself?
I think one is oh, I have to remind myself of this, but it's like, be grateful you have a job no matter what, and you have a company that supports you. I think the role of sales, I like where I am because I'm very close to the revenue, so it's a very sink or swim environment, in my opinion. But I understand where my accountability rests within what I'm supposed to be doing, not only for the company I work for, but also for my clients. That's ultimately more important, right? If we're talking about, closing opportunities, things like that, it really rests on the client's timing, not necessarily the company's. So we have to align that to make sure I'm doing what's right for the client at all times, while I'm also doing what's right for Forrester. I think a big area, and this ties into like what's changed with me in my tenure in sales, is like growing up, I was pretty creative guy. I was, playing drums and in bands. I love music. I studied film in college. I couldn't quite connect the dots around how creativity goes into sales. And I also, I don't think it was talked about that much. We build stuff out of nothing. And if you tie that back into what we do in sales, there's a lot there. It's like creativity around conversations, creativity in the story that we're presenting to clients. There's so much creativity. And once I connected the two, it changed, my job changed from getting each task done, like the thrill of completion, into really trying to be present within each task. It's like every email we write, the language is critically important. Every slide we share, every presentation. And that way, for me, I can kind of see my creativity coming to life. And I bring that up a lot because I think sometimes people take advantage of what the company has to offer in terms of presentation slides and talk tracks and all that stuff. It's like, I think it really has to be around the individual. How does the individual, what is their personality? For myself, it's how am I going to serve my clients, and how am I going to make sure that everything that I'm sharing with them is compelling? I want to lead with this a lot, by the way. It's like, I want you to feel motivated and inspired after this discussion. That's the objective of what I'm trying to achieve on this call. So I tell them what I'm trying to get them to feel at the top of the call. Because if I fall flat on my face, they might be like, "I'm not inspired, Trevor." I'd be like, "All right, well, I got some work to do." But it's a place where I want to take my clients and, prospective clients as well, obviously.
Yeah, of course. So here's a double-edged question.
Oh gosh.
What is the best piece of sales advice you've ever received? And then flip it. What's the best piece of sales advice you've ever given?
It's funny that about like 10 years ago, I kind of said it talking to my father, and I was talking about the grind of running a business while you're raising capital, and sort of my role, because I was the vice president of sales for this organization and having to hit those quarter milestones and all that stuff. And he said, but you're close to the revenue, and that means you know exactly how well you're doing or where you have to shift. And so what could be perceived as like a really difficult job, because I look at other roles, I look at marketers and I go, gosh, how do you do that? You're creating ideas out of the ether, and they go, I don't know how you do, how salespeople handle that kind of pressure for monthly quotas and quarterly quotas. And kind of got me inspired when my dad said that, which was, you want to be close to the numbers, you want to be close to the money, you want to be close to the revenue, because you have the distinct A to B of what's working or what's not. So that's a piece of advice. That's the thing that I shared it with you before you asked the question. It's on my mind every single day. And the second part was like, what's the best advice that I've shared?
Yeah.
I think there's the kind of a lame answer at a high level is like, control what you can control, right? It's like, we can only control so much, right? But what I share is, I believe that if I'm looking at any type of conversation with a client or a prospective client, it's like, I believe like what I think is the last level of support that I can offer. Okay. So maybe I go, this is all that I can do. I go, now let me talk to my manager and tell them, this is what I believe all I can do. What am I missing? 95% of the time, there's more that I can do. And a lot of I can do is relative to around something I missed, because it ties back into what you said, Joe, which is like, I lost my train of thought there, but it's thinking that when you're sitting in a silo around like, here I am, like I have to hit my quota or whatever like that. It's like, no, we have you have a team surrounding you, as long as you have the willingness to ask questions. There's a good line I always say is like, once I figured out I don't have it figured out, I figured it out. Like, never think I have it figured out. It keeps me really
I'm stealing
humble.
that.
Because once I'm like, I figured it out, then I'm probably in trouble. It's like, once I'm telling my wife like, no, I'm gonna fix the sink by myself. I got this. Like, I got this is when my wife is cringing.
Yeah, that's why I'm not allowed near any tools or anything
Yeah.
in the home that needs to be repaired.
Yeah, my success record is minimal at best. Minimal's let's just say next to nothing. Let's just be real.
Yeah.
So I think,
Very generous impression you've given yourself there.
right, but being a little bit like, as a a younger salesperson, it was, I think I'm supposed to sound like I have everything figured out. And it's that thing that comes with, tenure a little bit, but also having the courage to ask questions on those calls with your team, knowing the right environments when to ask for help. Also, like, I'm trying to avoid having the same challenges. So if I'm asking help around the same thing, I assume someone's going to be like, can you stop asking me? So I want to make sure I curtail this with, like, usually there's so many different challenges related to the complexity of sales, the ever shifting market environments. There's not a time I'm sitting there and going, I got this figured out. And I think it keeps us sellers humble. And I mean that in a very good way.
I can appreciate that. You'd mentioned something that resonated with me, so maybe we can just rip it up a little bit further. Because you talked about a number of different coaching skills that you've applied as an individual contributor. But if you had to strip it down to two or three high leverage coaching skills, especially now from your perspective as an individual contributor, which ones do you think move the needle fastest?
For coaching skills, when I was managing, the tagline was like, motivation through transparency, meaning like, just be honest, give your team as much as you possibly can around where everyone sits, where the team sits, and then trust that they're all looking to you for motivation. I mean, we sellers can have, the expectations is you're supposed to hit these numbers at all times. And like, that's a very tough ask. Achievable though. Otherwise you might be working for the wrong company. But every quota I've seen has been achievable and fair. Deals can go south, absolutely. But want to make sure that we've uncovered every single stone to advance a new partnership or to help a client. Those are big ones. And then the other coaching tool that's applied a lot from my leaders today, besides the motivation side, is kind of being able to know that they're going to defend the moves that each individual is making, okay, around certain things. Maybe it's, we don't want to get this deal done this quarter because, again, it's not on the buyer's time and they need more time to wrap their head around budget. But my responsibility is to get way ahead of that, because my responsibility also is to forecast for my manager, as much as I can. So, I think a lot of what individual people are looking for with managers is, it just ties into like they got my back. Like I believe that wholeheartedly. I wish if I did, I'd be happy to just share it and be like this one person. But I think when it goes back to what you said before. It's like as we're, I'm remote, so I'm not, in the threshold of walking around with the team at our corporate office. So I know that my team, I know that like I know up the chain of command that they all want me to succeed and they will do whatever they can to help each person. And that's kind of been down the line with most of my career, which always means a lot because it gives me the ability to be candid and actually express fear, which kind of ties into like having everything figured out, where it's like, gotta look confident, and to be able to go like I'm concerned about this and I want to talk to you about this. And that goes a long way, being able to be a manager where people can go to when they're feeling that fear. Because sellers are always, we have to be like, we use words like courage and things like that. It's like, yeah, but courage comes with walking through fear. It's not, it's
Yeah.
all,
You mentioned motivation once or twice, so when you have the chance, go check out the motivational coach at Dexter.
oh,
It
great.
helps with a lot of that daily on the spot, kicking the ass that you need to get through all the nitty gritty that no seller wants to do.
I love that. I do regularly. I do like fear inventories where I'm like, if this doesn't happen, what's going to happen? And then what happens? And then what happens? And then what happens? And you get to a point where I'm like, there's a lot of layers to get to a place where I'm homeless on the street. I think I'm going to be okay. But so it's like flipped. It's like I need to acknowledge uncertainty, but I also need the motivation as well. So I like that approach because every person I work with, individual contributors, we all have these secret like toolkits we have to be grasping at on a regular basis to get through tough times. And it makes us stronger. It helps us, I think, also just be and selling, like always be learning. And it's like prospecting, it's like every day you should be prospecting. Well, that goes into a whole balance conversation, but it's like the landscape shifts. So it's been shifting so rapidly. It's important that we're open to exploring shifts in how we work through deals, discovery calls, etc. And fortunately, like I have a lot of that at my fingertips as well, as I know that's one of the big things that you guys offer.
Yeah, and it's nice to see that you appreciate that, and just as importantly, are sharing the knowledge that you've gained over the years with some of the younger reps that may not have encountered all the pitfalls that you have. We got about 10 minutes left, so let's flip this and have a little fun. What's your go-to pump-up song before a big pitch or a demo?
I don't necessarily have a pump up. Like I'm such a music geek that this is where I'm like, I don't want to say the wrong song. Here's what I'll share. Like the
There's
first,
no such thing as the wrong song. I've heard people tell me they get pumped up with opera. So I've heard it all, my friend. There's
yeah.
no wrong answer to that question.
So what I like to do, if time permits, is I'll actually go on a walk, take my dog, 5, 10, 15 minutes, no technology. So it's
Nice.
just like get calm. Like I even do, but I'm going to go back to your answer. Like going like first tape I ever bought in 1984 with my own allowance money was U2's Unforgettable Fire. So the opening song is this song, A Sort of Homecoming. It's a big one for me because I go right back into when I was 8 years old, like putting this tape in, and I was trying to be cool because I have older siblings that were listening to U2. And this is like really cool. And my kids and my wife can attest, like, dad plays that song a lot. In fact, I'm a vinyl guy now, and it's sitting on the turntable because I was listening to that album last night while I was cooking dinner. And so that's a big one for me. But I don't have like a rah rah. I'm actually more like breathe, get comfortable.
Okay.
So there's a rah rah component, which I think is great because you can kind of alleviate the nervous system and get calm if you're like, but I tend to try and get as calm as possible before having
Okay.
conversations.
Alrighty. Next one. Sales buzzword you wish would disappear forever.
Oh gosh, that's a great question. This is the first thing that came to mind. I wish we had like a new word for prospecting because because every seller has to prospect. Every challenge of a company is to get the sellers to actually prospect. We talk about things like return rate of cadences of, you know, do this series of emails and you're going to get a 5% return. And it's like, so I look at prospecting as absolute, but I also am not looking at like a specific hit rate. And here's what I mean. I believe it's almost like a coverage play when you're working in large accounts, or you might be targeting tons of accounts. It's an awareness play where if you just stay on these people's minds, it will ultimately help you. And so I wish there was a less like targeted word where it would be like, growing awareness or something like that. Because we think about like success rate of what we do, it's in the single digits all day.
Yeah. Have a nicer term for it than I do. That's for damn sure. I call it, you got to do this. It sucks time.
And to that point, I do too. So here it goes back to what I mentioned earlier, though. It's like, you got to do this. It sucks. Let's get focused in it and not focused on the outcome, which is getting it done. And what I try and do with prospecting, and I'm not perfect at this, if there's really important stuff that I believe is worth sharing, it's very timely. Things like we do a lot of events for our clients and prospects. We do a lot of great webinars. I got to get it out. I do the hardest thing first. So I do that before I even, open my inbox. And there's a really good feeling about that. I'm like, I got the hardest thing done. And not perfect about it, but I try and do that. It's like exercise. It's some prospecting muscle where you're like, you got to do this. It sucks, but you're going to feel good afterwards. And I tell you, you're not going to get any.
Just takes one yes.
No one's emailing me if I don't email them. I mean, of course, the occasional, but in current clients. But like you have to, spread what you're doing out there, and people will bite. It's a numbers game. It's also a timing game as well. So I just think that word has been used for my entire career. That's our next business venture. That's what I'm going to start working on. How to change the wording of prospecting.
Okay. 2 really deep thought questions now. You ready? I have an answer to this, but I'm curious what yours is. Who is playing Trevor Nicholson in the movie about your sales career?
That's tough. These are tough questions.
I think Ryan Reynolds. You got very big Ryan Reynolds vibes, minus the Deadpool movies, but curious if who you think would play you in the movie about your sales career.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that guy any day of the week. It's not a question that I thought about. You bring up an interesting point. I know we're tight on time, but like, I like in a movie, the arc is sort of the hero's journey, right? We love the story of like the end of the second act. How are they going to get through this? And they ultimately prevail. There's a synchronicity to that within what we do in sales. And so that movie would be wrought with a lot of roller coasters. And an advisor for my previous business had I called him, it was around, we were in a dip, and he said, you're in the trough of sorrow. I was like, okay, that's definitely a way to phrase what I'm going through.
Yeah.
So it's when you're in that trough of sorrow, when you're in that ebb, we love the story. Everyone loves how you got out of it. No one really likes the person that's like, yeah, everything's great. His life was great. He went this. So, I think when you think about the sales, like a salesperson's movie, it's going to be a lot of, how are they going to get
Ups
out of
and
this?
downs.
What are they going to do here? Because it is, in that we live in that world of, I don't know how we're going to do that. And we love those stories and we celebrate them. And then if they don't work out, we learn from those, like I shut down a business, which was a very hard decision to make when we were raising more money, but ultimately that arc led me to where I am today. And it was a good decision. I don't regret it, but those are really tough decisions to make. I have to tell, advisors and investors, we're not going to continue, and here's why. It's a good question. It's a tough one to answer.
Yeah. Okay. Last one. Probably not tough to answer. The most unusual place you've ever taken a sales call from?
Oh, I got the great one. I was the 2 chiefs for raising capital for this startup. We were at like a place where if we don't get this done in 3 months, this thing's done. So we had our first daughter, my wife's on maternity leave. She goes back to work. So I'm taking care of my first daughter. And I'm just like, it's somewhat humbling. I'm feeling like I'm not providing what I should as a father. And I remember I have her like in like a rocker next to it, like a Zoom call. And I'm presenting while I'm trying to keep her from not crying. And that was the call where we got the $5 million investment. And the founders were, these guys were older, had children, like they were up a entirely different type of personal financial impact. And so at the time, it was looked at as like, God, this is so hard. I'm with my, it was a couple months with my daughter one-on-one before my wife got home. But now you're like, that was incredible. It was an incredible time. It full circle ties back into the sort of the arc, the ups and downs, where it's like, I had 2 months with my daughter and everything worked out. As someone says to me a lot, everything's worked out because it's worked out. You're okay.
Yeah. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join today. This has been a lot of fun. Anybody you want to shout out before we call it a day? Maybe some of the great leaders you have at Forrester, maybe some of the great people that you've coached in your career. If you want to throw anybody on Front Street, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's too many to list right now. You know who you are.
There we
We'll
go.
leave it at that. But as I said, like every person that's managed me has gotten me to where I am today. So it's a big deal.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that can say that about your coaching and leadership as well. Trevor, thank you again for taking the time to join us. This has been an absolute thrill, and hopefully we'll have you back soon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Joe. Super fun, man. Have a great day, man. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure was all mine.
See ya.